My name is Jason Mitchell, and I'm 36 years old. I still remember the day my parents told me they wouldn't help save my 6-year-old daughter's life, even as they dropped $300,000 on my brother's wedding. The image of my in-laws signing away their home while my own parents turned their backs still haunts me. 5 years later, everything has changed. The same parents who once refused to help now stand at my door begging for mercy. If you've ever had to choose between family and justice, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from. Hit that like button and subscribe to join me on this journey of heartbreak and vindication. Growing up in the suburbs of Boston, I was the older brother in what most would consider an upper-middle-class family. My father Harold worked as a financial advisor at a prestigious firm, while my mother Barbara managed a successful boutique downtown. We lived in a large colonial home with a manicured lawn, took annual vacations to beach resorts, and never worried about money. From the outside, we appeared to be the perfect American family, but those living within our walls knew better. The subtle favoritism toward my brother Alexander began early. 3 years younger than me, Alexander had a natural charisma that seemed to charm everyone, especially our parents. Where I received practical gifts on birthdays, Alexander got the latest gaming systems and designer clothes. When I brought home straight, as I got a nod of approval. When Alexander managed to pull B's and C's, there was a celebration dinner at his favorite restaurant. Alexander just processes information differently, my mother would explain to teachers. He's more of a creative spirit. Despite the obvious disparity in how we were treated, I kept my head down and focused on building my future. I joined every academic club available, secured scholarships, and set my sights on engineering school. Meanwhile, Alexander bounced between interests, weakly abandoning each new passion as quickly as it arose. "You need to be more like your brother," my father would tell me during rare heart-to-hearts. "People skills will take you further than book smarts." When college applications came around, I earned a partial scholarship to MIT. My parents covered the remaining tuition, but made it clear this was an investment they expected me to repay through career success. Alexander, meanwhile, decided college wasn't his path and proposed traveling Europe to find himself. My parents funded his year abroad without hesitation, calling it an educational experience. It was at MIT that I met Rebecca. Unlike the daughters of my parents' friends they'd tried to set me up with, Rebecca came from a modest background. Her father Frank worked as a high school science teacher, and her mother Martha as a nurse. Rebecca was studying biochemistry on a full academic scholarship, working part-time to cover her living expenses. She was brilliant, kind, and grounded, in a way that immediately drew me to her. When I brought Rebecca home to meet my parents during our second year of dating, their disapproval was palpable, though never stated directly. The questions about her family's background, subtle comments about people marrying within their social circles, and my mother's tight smile told the whole story. But Rebecca handled their thinly veiled judgment with such grace that I fell even more deeply in love with her. Alexander, meanwhile, had returned from Europe with stories but no direction. He jumped between community college programs for 2 semesters before dropping out entirely to start a revolutionary social media app that went nowhere. My parents funded each venture without question, always ready with encouragement and checkbooks open. When Alexander met Heather, the daughter of a real estate developer, my parents were ecstatic. Heather came from money, understood their social circle, and most importantly had connections that could benefit Alexander. Their approval was immediate and enthusiastic. Rebecca and I married after graduation in a modest ceremony we largely paid for ourselves. My parents contributed the minimum amount socially acceptable, making comments about our sensible approach. Alexander and Heather's engagement came just 2 months after ours, but the differences in how our parents responded were stark. From the moment the announcement was made, my mother was planning what would clearly be the wedding of the century. Despite the ongoing family dynamics, Rebecca and I built a life we were proud of. I secured a solid position at an engineering firm, and Rebecca began working in pharmaceutical research. We saved diligently, bought a small but comfortable home in a good school district, and lived within our means. When we found out Rebecca was pregnant 3 years into our marriage, it was the happiest moment of our lives. Lily came into the world on a rainy Tuesday morning, a tiny, perfect being with Rebecca's amber eyes and my dark hair. The moment I held her, I understood what unconditional love truly meant. I vowed then that Lily would never question her worth or feel the sting of favoritism the way I had growing up. My parents came to the hospital bearing appropriate gifts and congratulations, but even in this joyous moment, comparisons emerged. "She's lovely, though not quite as alert as Alexander was as a newborn," my mother commented while holding Lily. When Alexander and Heather had their son Ethan just a year later, my parents visited them daily for 2 weeks, hired a night nurse, and spoke incessantly about how extraordinary their grandson was. The pattern was established early. While my parents would occasionally babysit Lily, they would take Ethan for entire weekends. Birthday gifts for Lily were tasteful but modest, while Ethan received extravagant presents that far exceeded what was appropriate for a child his age. The cycle I had experienced was continuing into the next generation, but I was determined that Lily would never feel less than worthy. Despite these family dynamics, the first 5 years of Lily's life were largely happy ones. Rebecca and I poured our love and attention into raising a kind, curious little girl who approached the world with wonder. We had no idea that our family bonds were about to be tested in ways we could never have imagined. The first signs were so subtle that we almost missed them. Lily, normally bubbling with 5-year-old energy, seemed tired more often. She complained of headaches that would come and go. Her appetite diminished, and she'd sometimes wake up at night in discomfort. As attentive parents, Rebecca and I noticed these changes, but pediatrician visits resulted in diagnoses of common childhood ailments, a virus, growing pains, perhaps mild allergies. "Kids this age pick up everything at kindergarten, Dr. Peterson assured us. Keep an eye on her, but don't worry too much." We followed the advice, tracking symptoms and providing children's pain relievers when needed. Life continued its normal rhythm until that terrible Tuesday in March. I was in a meeting when my phone rang repeatedly. Stepping out to answer, I heard the panicked voice of Lily's school principal. "Mr. Mitchell, Lily collapsed during recess. The ambulance is on its way." The world stopped. I remember nothing about the drive to the school, only the sight of my little girl strapped to a gurney, her face pale as paper, oxygen mask dwarfing her delicate features. Rebecca arrived moments later, her lab coat still on, eyes wild with fear. The next 72 hours were a blur of emergency rooms, tests, specialists, and terrifying medical terminology. MRIs, blood panels, spinal taps. Lily endured it all, with a bravery that broke my heart. When the neurologist finally entered our consultation room, the grave expression told us everything before he spoke a word. "Lily has a rare autoimmune condition affecting her central nervous system," Dr. Thompson explained. "It's causing inflammation in her brain and spinal cord. Without aggressive treatment, the damage could become permanent, potentially fatal." The diagnosis, acute disseminated encephalomyelitis with rare complications, was so uncommon that our local children's hospital had limited experience treating severe cases. Our insurance approved standard protocols, but Lily's condition didn't respond as expected. Each failed treatment attempt meant more symptoms, more pain for our daughter, and mounting medical bills. "There's a specialist at Mayo Clinic," Dr. Thompson told us one evening after Lily's 3rd hospitalization in 2 months. "Dr. Hoffman has pioneered an immunotherapy protocol for atypical cases like Lily's. His success rates are remarkable, but..." The unspoken but hung heavy in the air. I knew without asking that our insurance wouldn't cover experimental treatments, especially at an out-of-state facility. "How much?" Rebecca asked, her voice steady despite the tremor in her hands. "The treatment course would be approximately $120,000, not including travel and accommodation expenses." The figure hit like a physical blow. We owned a modest home with a mortgage, had some savings, but nowhere near that amount. Rebecca had reduced her hours to care for Lily, further straining our finances. Already the co-pays and uncovered treatments had depleted our emergency fund. "We'll find a way," I promised, though I had no idea how. The next weeks became a desperate scramble for funds. We applied for a second mortgage on our home. Rebecca sold her grandmother's jewelry. We started an online fundraiser that brought in supportive but insufficient donations from friends and colleagues. I picked up consulting work on weekends, sleeping just 4 hours a night. Still, we were barely halfway to the amount needed, and Lily's condition was deteriorating. Each night after Lily finally fell asleep, Rebecca and I would sit at our kitchen table with spreadsheets, calculator, and mounting desperation. The treatment needed to begin within months for the best chance of success. Time was a luxury our daughter didn't have. "What about your parents?" Rebecca suggested one night, careful to keep her tone neutral. She knew the complicated dynamics with my family, knew how hard it was for me to ask them for anything. "They have the money," she continued gently, "and this is their granddaughter's life. Pride is a foolish thing when your child's life hangs in the balance." Despite the years of feeling secondary to Alexander, despite knowing where I stood in the family hierarchy, I agreed to ask. For Lily, I would have walked across burning coals, let alone swallow my pride. Little did I know that approaching my parents would lead to a betrayal so profound it would permanently alter the course of our family forever. I chose a Sunday afternoon to visit my parents, timing it when I knew Alexander and his family wouldn't be there. The familiar drive to their Tudor-style home in Wellesley brought back a flood of childhood memories, both good and painful. The sprawling property looked immaculate as always, spring flowers arranged in perfect beds along the curved driveway. My mother answered the door in casual designer wear, surprise evident on her face. Unannounced visits weren't part of our family protocol. "Jason, what a nice surprise. Your father's in his study." The living room showed signs of recent renovation, new furniture, art pieces I didn't recognize. I noted these details absently, my mind focused entirely on the conversation ahead. My father looked up from his desk when I entered his wood-paneled sanctuary, removing reading glasses with measured movements. "Son, everything all right? You look troubled." I sat across from him, my mother perching on the leather sofa nearby. For the next 20 minutes I explained Lily's condition in detail. The diagnosis, failed treatments, the specialist at Mayo Clinic, and the narrow window of opportunity for intervention. I laid out the financial situation, honestly explained our efforts to raise the money, and finally arrived at the point of my visit. "We need help," I said simply. "We've raised almost 60,000, but we're still short. The treatment needs to happen within 2 months for the best outcome. I wouldn't ask if there was any other option." The silence that followed seemed eternal. My father glanced at my mother, some unspoken communication passing between them. He cleared his throat, adjusted papers on his desk, straightened his posture, all delaying tactics I recognized from my childhood. "Jason," he finally began, voice formal, "you know we love Lily. This is terribly unfortunate timing." "Timing," I repeated, not comprehending. "We've committed significant funds to Alexander and Heather's wedding," my mother interjected. "The venues required substantial deposits, most non-refundable at this point." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline that never came. "The wedding is in 4 weeks," my father continued. "We've already invested over 300,000 with final payments coming due. The guest list includes important business contacts, partners from my firm, Heather's family's connections." "You're saying you can't help save Lily's life because of Alexander's wedding?" I asked, my voice barely controlled. "That's not what we're saying," my mother replied quickly. "It's just that we made these commitments to Alexander and Heather years ago. We promised them the wedding of their dreams. Our social standing, your father's business relationships. These events matter in our circles. More than your granddaughter's life." The words came out sharp, cutting. My father sighed, pinching the bridge of his nose. "Don't be dramatic, Jason. Children get sick and recover all the time. Have you considered less expensive treatment options? Perhaps a payment plan with this specialist?" "We've explored every option," I responded, ice forming around my heart. "This isn't elective surgery. This is Lily's life." "We understand that," my mother said in a tone that indicated she understood nothing. "But surely there are other resources, medical trials, charity organizations. You've always been resourceful, Jason." The conversation continued in this vein for another painful half hour. Excuses, justifications, suggestions that placed the burden anywhere but on their financially capable shoulders. The wedding date couldn't possibly be postponed. The deposits were non-refundable. Family reputation would suffer. Alexander and Heather would be devastated. When I finally stood to leave, the truth was inescapable. My parents had made their choice, and it wasn't Lily. "We'll send a check for 5,000, my father offered as I reached the door. "It's what we can manage right now." I left without responding the paltry sum, an insult rather than assistance. $5,000, less than they had spent on the ice sculptures for Alexander's wedding. The confrontation with my brother came 3 days later. Alexander called his voice a mixture of indignation and rehearsed concern. "Mom and Dad told me you've put them in an impossible position," he began without preamble. "Is that what they said?" I replied, stepping outside the hospital room, where Lily was undergoing yet another painful procedure. "Look, I'm sorry about Lily, truly, but you can't expect Mom and Dad to cancel our wedding. Do you know how many important people are coming? Heather's father has business associates flying in from Europe. I didn't ask them to cancel your wedding, Alexander. I asked for help saving my daughter's life. Your financial problems aren't our responsibility," he replied, the words cutting deep. "Heather and I have planned this for 2 years. It's not fair to ask everyone to sacrifice because you don't have adequate insurance." The conversation devolved from there, revealing the true dynamics that had always existed beneath our family's polished surface. Alexander, like our parents, saw Lily's life-threatening condition as an inconvenient timing issue, a financial problem that was solely my responsibility to solve. When I returned to Lily's room, Rebecca took one look at my face and knew. We held each other, the weight of betrayal heavy between us. That night, after Lily finally fell asleep, Rebecca broke down. "How could they?" she whispered through tears. "She's just a little girl, their granddaughter." The strain had begun to show in our marriage, not driving us apart, but revealing the deep injustice of our situation. Rebecca had never complained about my family's treatment of us over the years, but this crossed a line that couldn't be uncrossed. 2 days later, Rebecca's parents visited the hospital. Frank and Martha Reynolds had always been modest people of modest means. Frank's 30 years as a high school science teacher and Martha's career in nursing had provided them a comfortable but certainly not luxurious retirement. They lived in the same 3-bedroom ranch house they'd bought when Rebecca was born. As they sat with us in the hospital cafeteria, Martha reached across the table to hold Rebecca's hand. "We've been talking," Frank said, his voice steady. "We want to help with Lily's treatment." "Dad, we know you would if you could," Rebecca replied gently. "But this is more money than—" "We're selling our house," Martha interrupted. "We've already spoken with a realtor. The market's good right now." Rebecca and I stared at them in shock. "We can't let you do that," I protested. "That's your retirement security." Frank shook his head firmly. "There is no retirement if we lose Lily. The house is just a building. Family is what matters." Martha nodded in agreement. "We can find an apartment. What we can't find is another Lily." In that moment, the contrast between our two families couldn't have been more stark. My wealthy parents unwilling to adjust luxury plans to save their granddaughter, and the Reynolds ready to give up the security they'd worked their entire lives for without hesitation. "True family doesn't measure love in dollars," Frank said simply when I tried again to dissuade them. It was a lesson that would echo through the years to come, shaping decisions I hadn't yet imagined I would face. The sale of Frank and Martha's house closed with remarkable speed. A cash buyer, minimal contingencies, and the Reynolds' willingness to move quickly all facilitated the process. When Frank handed us a cashier's check for $135,000, their home's equity minus the small mortgage remaining, I couldn't speak through the lump in my throat. "Thank you. Doesn't begin to cover it," Rebecca said, embracing her parents. "Just bring our girl back to health," Martha replied, her eyes shining with unshed tears. The bittersweet reality of having secured the money through such sacrifice weighed heavily as we made arrangements for Lily's treatment. Dr. Hoffman's office in Rochester scheduled her for the following week, and suddenly our focus shifted to logistics, flights, accommodations near the clinic, arranging leave from our jobs. The Mayo Clinic stood like a beacon of hope, its reputation for medical miracles preceding it. Dr. Hoffman, a grandfatherly man with kind eyes and confident hands, reviewed Lily's case with careful attention. "It's good you've come now," he told us, after examining Lily. "Another month of progression would have made recovery much more challenging." The treatment protocol was intensive, a combination of specialized immunotherapy, plasmapheresis, to remove the antibodies attacking Lily's system, and targeted medications available only through this program. Each day brought a new medical challenge, a new procedure for our little girl to endure. Through it all, Lily showed a courage that humbled me. "It's okay, Daddy," she would say when I struggled to maintain composure during painful procedures. "The medicine hurts now but makes me better later." Rebecca stayed by Lily's side, constantly sleeping on the uncomfortable parent cot in her room, learning every medication and procedure schedule. I alternated between being there and working remotely, whenever possible, my employer showing more compassion than my own family had. Frank and Martha had moved into a one-bedroom apartment near their former neighborhood, downsizing their lifetime of possessions without complaint. They called daily for updates, their voices always cheerful despite the enormous sacrifice they'd made. Meanwhile, elaborate preparations for Alexander and Heather's wedding continued unabated. My mother called occasionally, asking brief, superficial questions about Lily before launching into excited details about wedding arrangements. 2. The renowned chef they'd secured the string quartet from Juilliard, the vintage champagne, being imported. 2 weeks into Lily's treatment, the formal invitation arrived at our temporary housing near the clinic. Thick cream cardstock with gold embossing announced the honor of our presence at the social event of the season. The RSVP card included meal choices that probably cost more per plate than we were spending daily on groceries. "You don't have to go," Rebecca said, watching my face as I examined the invitation. "I know," I replied, "but not going would just give them ammunition. They'd say we're bitter jealous trying to ruin their special day." The decision to attend wasn't easy. Lily would be between treatment phases, stable enough for Rebecca to manage for the weekend. My presence at the wedding was about appearances, maintaining the facade of family unity that my parents valued so highly. I flew back to Boston alone, checked into a hotel rather than staying at my parents' home, and arrived at the historic mansion venue precisely on time. The spectacle that greeted me was even more ostentatious than I'd imagined. Ice sculptures of Alexander and Heather adorned the entrance. Rare orchids imported from Thailand cascaded from every surface. A champagne fountain stood in the center of the cocktail hour, space vintage, Dom Perignon flowing endlessly. Waitstaff outnumbered guests 2-to-1, offering delicacies on silver trays. A 10-piece orchestra played softly in the background. "Jason, you made it," my mother air kissed near my cheeks, careful not to disturb her immaculate makeup. "How wonderful. Everyone's been asking about you." "Have they asked about Lily?" I replied quietly. Her smile faltered momentarily. "Let's focus on happy things today. It's your brother's special day." Throughout the evening I maintained a polite facade, accepting congratulatory handshakes, making appropriate small talk, raising my glass for toasts. Inside I was calculating. The seafood tower at the Raw Bar could have paid for 2 days of Lily's medication. The elaborate floral arrangements cost more than our monthly mortgage. The celebrity DJ my brother had flown in from Los Angeles commanded a fee that would have covered Lily's hospital stay. $300,000 on display, while my daughter fought for her life with money from her other grandparents' sacrificed home. The breaking point came during the reception. My mother, champagne glass in hand, approached me at my carefully selected table far from the main action. "Darling, several people have noticed you seem withdrawn. I understand you're dealing with difficulties, but could you make a bit more effort for Alexander?" Something snapped inside me. Difficulties? My daughter is fighting for her life while you throw money at ice sculptures and imported flowers. "Keep your voice down," she hissed. "This isn't the time or place." When is the time? When Lily's condition became critical. When Rebecca's parents sold their home while you wrote a check for the honeymoon villa in Santorini. When exactly should I have brought this up? She straightened her social mask firmly back in place. "You've always had a flair for drama, Jason. Always competing with your brother. Some things never change." It was the dismissal in her tone, the complete failure to acknowledge the reality of our situation, that finalized something in me. I placed my napkin on the table, stood up, and looked at her directly. "You're right about one thing. Some things never change, but I have." I walked out of the reception hall, ignoring the curious glances, the whispered comments. Outside in the cool evening air, I took my first deep breath in months. Something had shifted fundamentally. The ties that had bound me to toxic family expectations had begun to unravel. I returned to Rochester the next morning to my wife and daughter, to the people who truly constituted my family. I didn't yet know how our story would unfold, but I knew with certainty that this chapter with my parents had closed. Lily's treatment continued for another 6 weeks, a roller coaster of improvements and setbacks that tested our endurance. Dr. Hoffman remained cautiously optimistic, noting small victories that built upon each other: improved blood work better, neurological responses, longer periods of normal energy. "She's responding well," he told us during a Friday consultation. "Better than many cases I've seen with similar presentation." The moment Lily took her first steps without assistance after weeks of therapy, Rebecca and I held each other, tears flowing freely. Our daughter was fighting her way back, one painful step at a time. By month 3, we returned home with a recovery protocol medication regimen and follow-up appointments scheduled. The financial aftermath was staggering despite the Reynolds contribution. We had depleted our savings, maxed out credit cards, taken a second mortgage, and still faced ongoing medical expenses not covered by insurance. I returned to work full-time while Rebecca balanced part-time research hours with Lily's care and appointments. Most evenings found me at the kitchen table after Lily's bedtime, sorting bills into piles of urgent, critical, and somehow deferrable. To make ends meet, I took on consulting projects on weekends, designing systems for startups willing to pay premium rates for quick turnarounds. Sleep became a luxury, averaging 4 to 5 hours most nights. The physical toll was evident in the weight I'd lost, the gray that had appeared at my temples practically overnight. Frank and Martha had settled into their small apartment with remarkable grace. They'd furnished it sparsely with items from their former home, donating or selling most of their possessions. Whenever we expressed guilt over their sacrifice, Martha would wave away our concerns. "We have everything we need," she would say, "and we have Lily getting better. That's worth more than any house." The contrast between the Reynolds' contentment despite material loss and my parents' materialism had never been more stark. Frank and Martha found joy in simple Sunday dinners at our home, in watching Lily regain strength, in being present for the small victories of her recovery. My parents, meanwhile, called rarely and visited, never always with excuses about busy schedules and social obligations. Alexander and Heather returned from their month-long European honeymoon to settle into the luxury condo my parents had helped them purchase as a wedding gift. Alexander started yet another business venture, an exclusive membership club for young professionals, with seed funding from our parents. Initial press coverage was favorable, leveraging connections from Heather's family to gain attention. 6 months into Lily's recovery, an unexpected opportunity arose from the darkness we'd endured. During a routine follow-up with Lily's local specialist, I mentioned the difficulties we'd had with the medication delivery system. The specialized pump that administered her ongoing treatment was cumbersome, prone to user error, and caused her unnecessary discomfort. "I've actually been working on a design improvement," I admitted, showing the doctor sketches I'd made during long hospital nights. Dr. Thompson studied my drawings with growing interest. "This could work. The current system has limitations that frustrate many families." That conversation led to meetings with medical device engineers, preliminary prototypes developed in my garage workshop, and eventually a partnership with Trevor Wilson, my college roommate who now worked in medical technology development. "This has real potential," Jason Trevor said after reviewing my designs. "It solves actual problems for real patients. With some refinement, we could take this to market." Starting a company while still managing Lily's recovery and working full-time was madness by any rational standard. Yet the possibility of creating something that could help other families facing similar medical challenges drove me forward. Rebecca supported the vision completely, often joining brainstorming sessions at our dining room table late into the night. Trevor and I formed Mitchell Medical Innovations, investing our personal savings to develop a working prototype of the improved medication delivery system. We applied for patents, navigated the complex regulatory landscape of medical devices, and pitched to skeptical investors who questioned our credentials and experience. The first year was brutal. Rejection after rejection, technical setbacks, moments of doubt that had me questioning the entire endeavor. There were nights I nearly gave up, exhaustion clouding my judgment and eroding my confidence. "We can't quit," Rebecca would remind me during these dark moments. not just for us but for all the other families struggling with the same problems. Our breakthrough came when a pediatric medical conference accepted our application to demonstrate the prototype. Doctors and medical administrators gathered around our modest booth, asking pointed questions and sharing their own frustrations with existing systems. By the end of the 3-day event, we had letters of interest from 2 children's hospitals willing to trial the device. That small foothold led to our first round of legitimate funding, allowing me to reduce my engineering hours and focus more on the company. The prototype evolved through several iterations, each improving on the last based on medical feedback and patient experiences. Meanwhile, cracks had begun to appear in Alexander's perfect life. His membership club business struggled to retain customers beyond the initial buzz. Rumors of mismanagement circulated in local business publications. Heather's pregnancy announcement temporarily shifted family attention, but underlying financial issues continued to mount. My parents, still financially supporting Alexander's business ventures, seemed oblivious to the warning signs. When his company needed cash infusions, they provided them without question. When suppliers threatened legal action over unpaid invoices, my father leveraged connections to smooth things over. The pattern of enabling that had defined Alexander's upbringing continued into his adult business life. 2 years after Lily's treatment, our family dynamics had fundamentally transformed. Rebecca and I had emerged stronger, our partnership tempered by crisis. Lily had returned to school, still requiring some accommodations, but thriving in ways the doctors had once thought impossible. Frank and Martha had become even more integral to our daily lives, the bond strengthened through shared sacrifice. And across town, though I didn't yet know it, the foundation of my parents' carefully constructed world was beginning to crumble, setting the stage for an ironic reversal none of us could have anticipated. 3 years passed in a blur of determined work, gradual healing, and unexpected growth. Lily, now 9, had progressed beyond anyone's expectations. Though she still required quarterly checkups and daily medication, she participated fully in school, joined the science club, and showed particular talent in mathematics. The doctors used words like remarkable and exceptional case to describe her recovery. Mitchell Medical Innovations had evolved from a desperate side project into a legitimate contender in the pediatric medical device market. Our improved delivery system had received FDA approval and was being implemented in children's hospitals across the country. When a major medical supply company approached us about acquisition, Trevor and I made the difficult decision to retain control, but accept partnership investment to scale production. The company went public on a Tuesday morning in April. Trevor and I watched in stunned silence as the stock price climbed steadily throughout the day, far exceeding projections. By closing bell, the valuation had made us wealthy beyond anything I had imagined possible. The medical device born from Lily's suffering had become a lifeline for thousands of children, and a financial success story that business publications scrambled to cover. "We did it," Trevor said, clinking his coffee mug against mine as we watched the final numbers. "Lily did it," I corrected. "None of this exists without what she went through." The financial security allowed us to move from our modest home to a beautiful property with space for Lily to grow and explore. The house, while certainly luxurious compared to our previous one, was selected primarily for the excellent school district and proximity to Rebecca's research facility. We maintained the values that had guided us through the difficult years, cautious about allowing sudden wealth to change our family's foundation. One of my first actions after the company went public was purchasing a dream home for Frank and Martha. I still remember their faces when we drove them to the beautiful Cape Cod-style house near the water. "We can't accept this," Frank protested, even as Martha's eyes filled with tears at the sight of the garden she had always wanted. "You sold your home to save Lily," I reminded them. "This isn't a gift. It's returning what you gave when it mattered most." With Rebecca's guidance and support, we established the Lily Mitchell Foundation, dedicated to helping families afford specialized medical treatments not covered by standard insurance. The foundation worked directly with hospitals to identify cases where financial barriers prevented children from receiving optimal care. Within its first year, 17 families received full funding for treatments that would have otherwise been financially impossible. While our family flourished, Alexander's world began collapsing under the weight of poor decisions and continued dependency. His membership club business failed spectacularly, investors withdrawing, after financial irregularities came to light. Rather than learning from the experience, Alexander immediately launched a luxury travel concierge service again, with substantial backing from our parents. When that venture also failed within 18 months, he pivoted to restaurant ownership, convincing our parents to invest in an upscale dining concept in Boston's Back Bay. Despite hiring a renowned chef and extensive publicity, the restaurant hemorrhaged money from its opening night. Alexander's management style, absent when things went poorly, taking credit when brief successes occurred, alienated staff and business partners alike. My parents, now in their mid-60s, continued writing checks to support Alexander's failed ventures, their retirement funds gradually depleting with each new business disaster. Then came the financial crisis that shook markets worldwide. My father, who had maintained an aggressive investment portfolio despite his age, saw his assets plummet in value. The timing couldn't have been worse, coinciding with Alexander's restaurant requiring another substantial cash infusion to avoid bankruptcy. I learned about my parents' financial troubles through industry connections rather than directly from them. Our relationship had remained distant but cordial, limited to brief calls on holidays and occasional updates about Lily's progress. They had never visited our new home, had never acknowledged the success of my company, had maintained the pattern of emotional distance that had defined our relationship for decades. The final blow to their financial security came when my father experienced a severe heart attack requiring complex cardiac surgery and extended rehabilitation. Their premium health insurance, while comprehensive, didn't cover experimental procedures recommended by specialists. The irony of the situation, medical costs exceeding insurance coverage, wasn't lost on me. Alexander's response to the family crisis was predictable. Rather than stepping up to support our parents, he and Heather sold their luxury condo, purchased a smaller home in a less prestigious neighborhood, and announced they needed to focus on their own family's security. The son, who had received endless financial support when times were good, was nowhere to be found when sacrifice was required. 5 years after they had refused to help save my daughter's life, my parents found themselves in a position eerily parallel to the one Rebecca and I had faced. Medical bills mounting, insurance insufficient, retirement funds depleted, and the son they had always favored unwilling to adjust his lifestyle to help. The call came on a Sunday evening as our family finished dinner. Seeing my father's name on the caller ID was surprising enough to cause a momentary pause before I answered. "Jason." My father's voice sounded older, more fragile than I remembered. "I wonder if we might come by to speak with you. There's something important we need to discuss." The conversation was brief, arrangements made for them to visit the following evening. After ending the call, I sat in silence, processing the implications of what was clearly coming. "They need money," Rebecca stated, simply knowing without being told. "Yes," I replied, a complex mix of emotions washing through me. "After all this time, they need my help." The irony wasn't lost on Lily, now old enough to understand the family dynamics at play. "Are you going to help Grandpa and Grandma, Dad?" she asked as Rebecca cleared the dinner dishes. "I don't know yet, sweetheart," I answered honestly. Sometimes helping people and doing the right thing gets complicated when history is involved. As my parents' car pulled into our driveway the next evening, I found myself at a crossroads I never expected to face. One where justice and mercy would need to find balance in the shadow of past betrayal. My parents looked smaller somehow, as they entered our home, diminished by circumstances and time. My mother's designer clothes, while still expensive, showed signs of age. My father moved cautiously, the cardiac episode having left its mark on his once commanding presence. Their eyes widened, taking in our home, not ostentatious by wealthy standards, but certainly evidence of financial success. Rebecca greeted them with more warmth than I could have managed, offering refreshments and making comfortable small talk. Lily, curious about these grandparents who had been peripheral figures in her life, introduced herself with the confidence of a child who knows she is deeply loved. "You've grown so much," my mother commented awkwardly. "You look just like your father did at your age." Eventually, we settled in the living room, the purpose of their visit hanging unspoken between us. My father cleared his throat, pride visibly wrestling with necessity. "Your company has done very well," he began. "We've read about your success in the business journals." "Yes," I replied. simply not making this easier for him. "We're proud of what you've accomplished," my mother added quickly. "Always knew you had potential." The silence stretched uncomfortably until my father finally addressed the purpose of their visit. "Jason, we find ourselves in a difficult position. The market downturn affected our investments significantly. Alexander's businesses required substantial support over the years. And now these medical expenses." He gestured vaguely at his chest. "What your father is trying to say," my mother interjected, "is that we need financial assistance. Temporarily, of course. Just until the market recovers, and we can liquidate some assets." The parallels to our conversation 5 years earlier were striking. The roles now completely reversed. I felt a complex storm of emotions: vindication, anger, sadness, and underneath it all a surprising sense of compassion. "What specifically do you need?" I asked, my voice neutral. They explained their situation in detail. My father's experimental treatment cost the depletion of their retirement accounts, the underwater mortgage on their home following the market crash. The total they needed to stabilize their situation was substantial, nearly $200,000. "I need time to consider this," I told them after they finished. "This isn't a decision I can make immediately." Their disappointment was evident, but they couldn't argue. They had come as supplicants, not in a position to demand immediate answers. After they left, I sat on our back porch watching the sunset and processing the conversation. Rebecca joined me, her presence comforting in my turmoil. "What are you thinking?" she asked, always perceptive of my internal struggles. "Part of me wants to refuse them outright," I admitted. "To let them experience what we did, what your parents sacrificed for Lily." She nodded, understanding completely. "And the other part wonders what that would make me. If I become what they were, do I lose something essential about myself?" The next morning I called Frank, asking if he could come over to discuss something important. Since buying them their new home, we had seen Rebecca's parents almost daily. Frank had become the father figure I needed, offering wisdom without judgment. Over coffee at our kitchen table, I explained my parents' situation and my conflicted feelings. "You're facing the oldest moral dilemma in existence," Frank said thoughtfully. "Justice versus mercy. They don't deserve your help based on past actions. But perhaps this isn't about what they deserve. What is it about then?" "Who you choose to be," he replied. "Their actions define them. Your actions will define you." His words stayed with me as I contemplated my options. That evening I discussed possibilities with Rebecca, whose compassionate nature balanced my more pragmatic approach. "We could pay for your father's treatment through the foundation," she suggested. "It fits our mission of helping people access medical care they can't afford." "And Alexander?" I asked. "He'll undoubtedly come asking next." "We offer him a legitimate job at the company," she proposed. "Not an executive position, something he has to earn, with clear performance expectations and accountability." The solution began taking shape. Boundaries rather than revenge, assistance with conditions rather than rejection or blind enabling. I arranged to meet my parents at their home, wanting them to feel comfortable for what would be a difficult conversation. Their house, once immaculate, showed subtle signs of deferred maintenance. Inside spaces that had once been filled with luxury items appeared sparser, valuable pieces likely sold to manage expenses. "I've made some decisions," I began once we were seated in their living room. "I won't be giving you the money you asked for directly." Their faces fell, my mother's lips tightening in familiar disappointment. "Instead," I continued, "the Lily Mitchell Foundation will cover Dad's experimental treatment costs." The foundation was established specifically to help families access medical care beyond what insurance provides. Relief mixed with confusion crossed their features. "As for your other financial issues, I'm not offering a bailout. I am, however, offering Alexander a legitimate position in our company's customer experience department, entry-level with standard salary and benefits. If he performs well, there's room for advancement." "That's very generous, but Alexander has his own business interests," my mother began. "Failed business interests," I corrected gently. "This isn't a handout. It's an opportunity for him to learn sustainable business practices and contribute actual value." My father nodded slowly, a newfound respect visible in his expression. "And our home, the mortgage situation." I'll have my financial advisor review your overall situation and recommend restructuring options, not a gift, but professional guidance to help you establish stability. You'll need to downsize, live within more modest means. The lifestyle you've maintained isn't sustainable anymore. The conversation continued for hours, moving from initial entitlement through reluctant acceptance to the beginnings of genuine humility. For perhaps the first time, my parents began to see me clearly, not as the less favored son seeking approval, but as a man who had built something meaningful despite their lack of support. When I returned home that evening, Lily was waiting up past her bedtime, curious about the outcome. "Did you help Grandma and Grandpa?" she asked, as I tucked her in. "In a way," I explained. "I'm helping with Grandpa's medical treatment like how we help other families through our foundation." She considered this thoughtfully, because it's the right thing to do even if they didn't help me when I was sick. The wisdom of children often surpasses our own. Yes, exactly that. Sometimes being the better person means helping even when it isn't deserved. "I think that's good," she said sleepily. "Being mad forever just makes you stay sad too." The healing process with my parents began slowly, tentatively. My father's treatment progressed successfully, and he approached me with genuine gratitude after his recovery. Alexander initially rejected the job offer, but financial necessity eventually led him to accept. To everyone's surprise, including his own, he showed aptitude for customer relations when held accountable for his performance. My mother struggled most with the new family dynamic, her identity so long defined by social status and material display. The necessity of selling their home and moving to a comfortable but modest condo required significant adjustment. Yet even she gradually discovered that simplified living offered unexpected freedom. We established new family traditions, centered on gratitude and giving back. Sunday dinners now included both sets of grandparents, an initially awkward arrangement that evolved into genuine connection. Frank and Martha's natural warmth eventually broke through decades of my parents' practiced formality. The foundation expanded its reach, partnering with hospitals nationwide to identify families facing impossible medical costs. Each success story, a child receiving needed treatment, a family spared financial ruin, reinforced that the hardship we had endured had created something meaningful. 5 years after my parents came asking for help, our extended family gathered for Lily's 14th birthday. Around the table sat the complete cast of our story: Rebecca and me, Frank and Martha, my parents, Alexander and Heather, and their children. The journey from crisis to healing, from betrayal to reconciliation, hadn't been easy or perfect. Boundaries remained important, trust rebuilt slowly through consistent actions rather than words. What had changed fundamentally was my understanding of family. Blood relations don't automatically constitute true family. True family proves itself in crisis, stands steadfast when sacrifice is required, celebrates genuine success without jealousy, and values people above possessions or appearances. Lily's illness, despite its trauma and pain, ultimately revealed who truly loved us and reshaped our family into something stronger, more authentic than before. The revenge I once contemplated would have continued the cycle of hurt. The boundaries with compassion we chose instead broke that cycle, allowing healing none of us thought possible. As I look around at my family today, I'm grateful for the difficult lessons that brought us here. The parents who once refused to help save my daughter now volunteer weekly at the foundation bearing her name. The brother who once dismissed our crisis as financial problems now works diligently to support other families facing similar circumstances. We can't choose our blood relations, but we can choose who we call family and how we respond when those relationships are tested. Sometimes the most powerful response to betrayal isn't revenge, but creating something better from the broken pieces. If my story resonates with you, I'd love to hear about your own experiences with family challenges and how you navigated them. Have you ever had to choose between justice and mercy with family members? How did you balance holding boundaries while still leaving room for reconciliation? Drop your thoughts in the comments below. Hit that like button if this story touched you, and subscribe to hear more real-life journeys through family complications. Thank you for listening to my story, and remember that sometimes our greatest pain can lead to our most meaningful purpose.